All right, we're live. How you doing?
Yes, sir. I'm doing good, man. I am doing good. It's good to see your face. It's been a while.
Hey, yeah, it's been a few years. What has it been?
Yeah.
Maybe 4 years?
Yeah, I
Something like
think
that.
since
About
we
that.
actually were in person with each other, which is, I don't know, does this count?
Maybe.
I
It's
think
a,
so.
yeah, sort of. Close
In a
enough.
very 2025 sort of way.
Yeah, no in person anymore. It's just all virtual, everything.
Right,
Right?
right. It
Yeah,
does seem
maybe
to be going that way.
we can get together sometime next time up north, further north in Florida.
Sure.
What have you been up to? A lot of changes, right?
Yeah, got married. That was a big change. Bought a house. Those are probably the two biggest changes. But then still within the wrestling space, but not quite at the level that I was before, where I was. It was kind of all that I had time for. Where now I've been able to dabble in some other things, and I think I've helped myself to find what might be the direction for post wrestling.
Yeah. And well, how long have you been doing that? Like 2 years now?
DDP yoga's been a couple years now, and between that and then I've been doing some personal training with Muay Thai, and also doing some coaching some professional wrestling as well. So between those things, I feel like I'm starting to figure out what the path might be.
Just staying busy. Yeah. How much wrestling are you doing these days?
3 4 times a month.
Oh, damn. That's still a lot, right?
Still, I mean, it's still the best way to pay the bills as far as easiest, most bang for the buck,
Yeah.
still, and God willing, like my body's still holding up for it. So yeah.
Yeah, that'd be my concern is the longevity there. How long does somebody usually last in pro wrestling?
I
Probably
guess
not as long as you.
it depends on the person. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I would say that I'm what most would consider an advanced stage in pro wrestling, but I think that you have
You
more guys.
cover your speaker.
Sorry, I think you have more guys at my age nowadays than used to be, or close to it, that are still doing it. I don't think it's quite as rare these days, but yeah, I mean, we'll see, man. I figured I'd be done by now.
What do you think? Just smarter wrestling or just health advances, taking care of yourself better?
I think probably a little bit of all things, a little bit of all of it. It's actually kind of what brings me into like DDP yoga as well, which I think is one of the main contributors to why I am still able to do it. I started doing DDP yoga in 2018, and then certified a couple years ago, and have been teaching it more now. And so because I'm doing it just I'm doing I do it pretty much every day, whether it be on my own for my
Yeah, I
own
saw
benefit,
your.
or teaching classes, or teaching PT clients, like every day. Like literally, it's like reading my Bible. It's something I do every day, and it's something that thankfully can be done every day, because there's more vigorous, less vigorous, 13-minute session, all the way up to 90 minutes. So like you can it meets you where you are.
That's good. That's like the Bible, right? The Bible meets you where you are and gives you a path forward.
It
That's
does. It's
all.
interesting. The more I've read the Bible, the more I get to where I'm like, how does this know what I needed to hear today? And then that's how you start to realize, like, oh man, the word, it's living. I never understood it in those terms. I would hear people say it, but wasn't
It's
until the.
more experiential, right? So it's based off. It's the reason it's hitting like that is because you're seeing it through the lens of where you're currently at and what's in motion, right? It's different. You're covering the mic again. It's it's different from there's a difference between, I can say on the spiritual path, there's a difference between just information and application, right? So people who are really serious about progression, they're the ones that they could take information, actually put into action to test it out and see, okay, how does this apply in my life? What are the fruits? What are the results? And kind of fine tune it depending on where they're at, right? There was a book I'm reading right now is what's the name, like Walter Wallace or whatever. He wrote this book, and he's talking about man has the potential of God to move forward and progress, right? And he's saying is you always have what you need at the right time. So as you're moving and progressing forward, you're opening up to new knowledge, new experiences, right? But I think that goes back to what you're saying about the right message at the right time. It's once you hit that next stage or whatever, then the next piece comes in. But you don't really get that next, the next piece is always received when you prepare yourself for the one further beyond that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like when we get stuck or we stagnate, we're not opening ourselves up to receive that next piece. So we always have to, even little movement, we still have to move forward to get the next piece, next piece, next piece.
Right. That
So we
makes
can
sense.
take, yeah, right. And there should be never a point where we can't grow and progress in whatever way, whether it's, and things shift and change. But, I'm sure everybody can identify with this of hitting those walls in life and
Uh-huh.
feeling that's it, feeling very, very stuck. Then
Yeah.
something, it's like we have this thing in the lineage. I feel it's called a ring pass knot. So it's as we're kind of growing from little us and expanding, we have these, like imagine like a tree, like the rings on the tree,
Yeah.
right? So say there's like 100 rings, and some of them are lighter rings, and some of them are thick. They're denser, harder, like areas of life, and
Yeah.
those are the ones that feel like we're really stuck. And like when we break through those, that's when we have the quantum leap and a lot of the
Right.
growth come in, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, it can get very deterring because it's frustrating.
Yeah, I understand the frustration, because those they're trying times. There's been a lot of scripture dedicated to this sort of thing, but there was a thing that I listened to recently where it was talking about rejoicing in your suffering, but truly rejoicing in your suffering, because that stage of suffering is kind of the precursor to breakthrough, because so then actually not trying to rejoice in your suffering, but actually rejoicing in your suffering, because and again, this comes back to faith, like that's being faithful in that, like, I know what's coming because the history would tell me so, and I'm going to believe it. That's faith. It's kind of like in Exodus when the Israelites were led out of Egypt, and then they said to Moses, like, why did you bring us out here before the parting of the Red Sea? Why did you bring us out here to die? Why didn't you leave us in Egypt? We were slaves, but we weren't going to die in the wilderness. And it was like one of those things where it was like how quickly they forgot the joyous occasion that it was that he freed them from slavery in Egypt, and I think that that's the way we get very often, is you forget during the struggle that, like, he brought you out of the last struggle to get you to this struggle. Like, you should almost start to expect that, you know there's going to be another struggle.
Well, as long as it's necessary struggling, right? I think that you can relate that all to almost to people that are, say, a bad relationship, like comfort, right? They know
Hmm.
the thing is destroying them, but they're scared of the unknown. They're scared of the next step because, like we were saying before, it's like if you knew the next step, you'd already have it, right? So
Right.
that fear isn't that it's the next thing's bad. It's a fear of the unknown, right? It's a new level. It's a blank canvas to start working and building on that new version of yourself,
Yeah. I
you know,
guess that's where my understanding of faith is now, and just a few years ago, that would not have been my definition of faith. I would have seen it in a different way.
what's different between a few years ago and now?
Now faith is just the belief that I'm going to control what I can control, and the things that are out of my control, I may try to control them. But as soon as I can bring myself that awareness to realize, like, oh, this is one of those things that are outside of my control, to refrain from trying to control it, because I have to trust that, like the last time, it's under someone else's watch and he's got it under control. So I have to give it to him. I have to give it away, and trust that, like, why would he bring me through the last one if he's not going to bring me through this one? And now him bringing me through might not look the way I expect it to look, but just the same, that's faith, right? Like the faith is knowing it's
Yeah,
gonna be worked
it's a
out.
prep. It's a preparation, right? Because where were you, say, 5 years ago? It was more because right now, like with your DDP and everything you're doing now, it's more focused on others,
Yeah.
right? So it's almost like it's forcing you into a new higher role of leadership where you're able to serve more people rather than, going from service to self to service to others. I mean, I think pro wrestling and entertainment always serves others as well, right? There's, the guys that do that.
To a degree, but I'll be honest about pro wrestling. Like it's very self-serving. It's full of selfish acts and not selfless, which is kind of where the oxymoron of Diamond Dallas Page, the guy who created DDP Yoga, where he kind of comes from is like Dallas was a former pro wrestler as well, and he's the opposite of selfish. He is quite selfless, and that's just not always been the norm in pro wrestling. So for a man like himself to have the level of success that he has, and the vehicle to be DDP Yoga, and then for that, I sought certification in it, but it was a generous branch extended to me because Dallas certified me, and they did it all through them, and that wasn't. It was a gift, and then I was able to, and now I'm able to reach people within the wrestling industry, but also outside of the wrestling industry, and help them become healthier and better movers, and better equipped to be a better grandparent. You know,
Yeah, right. But that's the next step, right? It's service of self and service to others.
I
That's the
think
same
so.
thing.
I
Yeah.
think that's what I'm kind of stumbling upon now, and even if I take it into terms of wrestling, like I've been doing a lot of coaching and a lot of teaching of Muay Thai and teaching of pro wrestling, and how some of these, I mean, that's how you and I know each other, is from martial arts,
Hmm.
and how those things all pertain to one another, and how at one time it was my like career work was how to fuse those worlds, pro wrestling and martial arts, because that's what I did, was martial arts, but my job was as a pro wrestler trying to make the martial arts that I enjoyed fit into pro wrestling in a way that can fit into pro wrestling. I guess I'm hoping some people will read between the lines here. That being what I did for so long, I realize now, like I have a good amount of knowledge on how to do that. And so here I have the opportunity to not only do DDP yoga and help people, but to help some of these younger people coming up in pro wrestling with figuring out, okay, well, do you have a martial art maybe that you're trying to get into your pro wrestling and you don't know how that fits?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really has become service to others is a kick that I wasn't necessarily expecting.
No, I don't think anybody expects that. I think when somebody asked me before, they're like, "Well, did you always want to be like a guide and a healer and work with people?" I'm like, "No, never."
Yeah,
I was worried about, because most people you get, it's like most people just want to be successful just for the sake of being successful, and then life sort of just hit. It's funny. This is kind of how nature and God kind of hits you. It's like eventually, even with pro wrestling, let's use that as an example. It's like your body can only go so far, right? You've had a very long career, but maybe, hey, maybe somehow you're able to squeak 60 years out.
yeah,
Maybe, who knows, right?
yeah.
But eventually, there's like three levels. It's like creating with your body, creating with your mind, and creating with your spirit, right? So now it's like you're more creating with your mind and serving others and sharing your knowledge and wisdom that way, and it's less about your body, right? I think
I
that's
mean, that's the first time I've heard somebody put it into those three categories, and I do feel like on a very surface level right now, because I do think that I need to ponder that. This is the first time you kind of presented it to me. I think it's going to take me thinking about it a little bit more, but just on a surface level, it does feel as if, like, leaving that physical. I've always said, like, from the time I was a child, I felt easily expressible physically. Like I always felt like I had no problem expressing myself physically, but like you just said, now I'm still able bodied and by the grace of God able to physically express myself. But maybe that's where things are changing, for numerous reasons. But maybe that's the stage that I'm stepping into.
Yeah, because think about as we progress, even if after we leave this life, right? It's like we leave our physical body behind. Like after this life, we can't use our physical body anymore anyway. So it's like, what do we create with after here once we move on and progress? Is like we create with our energy, right? That's why I was saying it's like the body, the mind, the spirit. The spirit's that energetic force, and that's why you see as people get older, it's less about the stuff, the physical stuff, right? And it's more about the
Right.
it's more about the essence. It's what do they value more? It's like when they value love and relationships and connection and joy and peace, and they're not running around all crazy anymore. They're just more chill and relaxed, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I get
yeah,
that.
it's one of the things on the I was saying before when we were talking. It's like I work with a lot of younger guys and older guys, and I try to weave both worlds because the younger guys, obviously, they're trying to build their foundation, their physical success. They need a lot of structure and consistency and discipline. But I really want to have them understand that early on. It's like all these things that you're doing is not for the actual thing. It's for the feeling. It's for the energy behind that, right? It's like you don't have, you're talking about buying a house, right? I have a lot of these younger guys buying houses and having families. It's like you're not buying the house just to say, "Hey, look at my big house. Look how cool it is." You're buying that because it symbolizes protection and safety for your family. So it's
Right.
all the things behind that. When we focus on the essence first, then we get to experience it externally. And
Yeah.
that's where it's like that recalibration can be tough because we're so tuned into, oh, I need to have the stuff, right? It's like, well, why do you actually want the stuff? What's that feeling that's sitting behind the stuff?
Yeah, I can relate to that because I think that being married recently, and not so much recently, it'll be 4 years in July, but like I knew that I had found this person that I wanted to be married to. And so not necessarily wanting all the stuff, but like I wanted and it wasn't necessarily like I wanted that life with someone and then I filled the void. No, I found this person that made me want that life, but it's not so simple in application.
Right.
There's a lot of give and take and sacrifice that comes along with like being a husband and wife. And I think for a lot of younger guys, not that I'm younger, but where I was in, I guess, even my maturity level, yeah, it's not as simple as you think. It really is not. And there's a lot of work that goes into it. Rewarding work for sure, but it's work.
Yeah. A lot of people try to avoid the struggle, which the struggle is where you obtain that thing, right? The struggle is where you obtain the joy, right? And people come up to struggle and then they just get scared or they're unsure, unconfident, whatever it is, and they run away from it. Then they wonder why they're going to constantly be stuck, right? I
Well,
think
that's
it's
why the divorce rate is like 60% in this.
Yeah, it's like a relationship. If you have a struggle, you should seek relationships, right? One of the things I tell people in my classes is the absolute worst thing you can do in life is isolate, right? Life, for some reason, right? It's set up so we have to seek people out. We have to help people. We have to serve people to get to the next level. There's no, as a single person, you can only get so far in life. Then you're going to hit a hard wall, and it's going
Yeah.
to it's going to humble you and have you, you know, being humble. It's opening yourself up to where can I receive that next level of help? Where can I receive the energy I need to strengthen and push past that limitation, right? And it's the same thing with definitely in marriage, right? That's the most intimate relationship you're ever going to have. But it's like, hey, there's a struggle. How can we come together and like how can we be stronger together to fight through it?
I
That's
think that 100% that the application of that is learning what those things actually are, because being a teammate and I figured like I've been on teams my whole life. I played football, played lacrosse, like I've been in organized sports my whole life, but it's different when it is your wife. I'm not ashamed to say that like I've dropped that ball numerous times trying to figure it out,
well,
but
it's
again,
different if
being a
with
parent
teams you get to yell at people. That's the cool thing,
that could be it. The yelling
Yeah, you get to
doesn't
scream and
work
yell.
at
Yeah,
home.
if you're on a team with 10 guys, you have to yell and scream at them and just force them to do
Yeah,
something. And
yeah.
that works in the masculine world, but women are a whole different beast. Like it's a lot more patience and tenderness.
it's a whole different kit and caboodle.
Yeah, it's like you have to hold your own by and yeah, that's a funny thing that you're saying. The application is just the hard part because it's holding your own and knowing yourself, but then understanding somebody who's wired completely different and
Well,
trying to
that's the
fit.
difficult part, right? The difficult
Yeah,
part is that like you need the masculine and you need the feminine. And I think that because we have a lot of single family homes and stuff like that, like it gets that's where the polarity gets screwed up. And when that polarity, let's just say for instance, like when a woman is accustomed to assuming the masculine for whatever reason, because she had to fill that role for a long time, and then comes to a scenario where the masculine can be provided but is not being provided in the way that
they
that
expect or they're used
yes.
to.
So then there's a protective mechanism that goes up that says, well, if you're not going to be the masculine, I will be. But then that prevents submission to the masculine. So now the feminine is not able to submit to the masculine, and then that is by definition is screwed up polarity. You
Yeah,
know,
but it's all driven by fear though, right? Because we were saying like what works at level one. Say let's use that example because there's a lot of very masculine women that are struggling with that. Um, that might have. I work with a lot of women that have been divorced or just they're very successful, and their desire is to seek out a good partner and be able to receive that, but it's so distorted because they were doing things. They were so driven by fear that they had to step in their masculine to survive. And then once they meet that guy that can actually provide that thing they want, they're just not used to it, and they still want to hold on to that fear driven kind of overdrive or what do they have. It's like, back to what we were saying pre-call, it's like what works at level one doesn't work at level two. And the difference between level one and level two is a letting go of something that might have worked to ascend that next level. It's like somebody who, in a very physical example, think of somebody who's 100 pounds overweight and they're trying to get to the level two. It's like they have to shed the weight, the opinions, the emotion, the crap so they're light enough to, not
right?
float, but like to actually get to the next level. So each level is letting go, letting go, letting go, you
Yeah,
know. And that's where a lot of
yeah,
people, they force things. There's a lot of fear there, and it's understandable because it's like we were saying before, it's fear of the unknown. It's like, oh, this could be level two can be way better, but I'm so scared because I don't know, so I'm gonna hold on to level one with everything
right.
I have.
Well, and you don't have, if you're holding on to level one like that, and I guess it's probably you're holding on because it is a process, so you have to be patient. You're not going to release level one all at one time. But if there truly is not enough room for level two with what level one there, it's like, okay, that process of level one making its way out the door can be just such a painful process because it doesn't feel or doesn't seem as if like level two's ever gonna actually happen.
Well, it feels like something's dying because it is. Like the parts of you that don't serve your progression are dying, and that's
Right.
what people they feel that, and they judge that of, oh, this is bad, but it's like, no, that's, or just pressure. We're talking about other stuff, but it's clearing out because, if this water bottle's like half empty, if it's full of shit, the first step to receive new stuff is emptying that out,
Is
kind of,
getting this, yeah.
yeah, getting the shit out. And that's why the first initial
Right.
pressure, the fire or the discomfort comes in. It's like, it's not that it's bad, it's preparing, it's removing the shit so you're actually able to receive more and get to
Yeah.
that next, you know.
Well, and I think too, I think a big thing is the patience of the process and the ability to understand that that's exactly what this is. It's a process. So it's not going to happen right away, but it's going to look like it's not happening sometimes. Or it's
Wow.
going to
Yeah.
look like it's definitely going to take longer than you want because that's the way we're wired as human beings is to like get it tomorrow, especially with the internet and
Especially
everything now. So yeah, I mean there's a lot of stuff working in direct conflict with one another.
Well, thinking about training, I forget who it was. It said the hardest belt to get is the white belt because when you're
Yeah,
a white belt, you got to show up. You have to have a lot of faith, right? You're getting your ass kicked every single day for
yeah,
bare minimum 2 months. You're getting your ass kicked every
sure,
day, right? And
yeah,
you're not seeing results, and you go home beat up. The higher belts are beating the shit out of you,
yeah,
or even like going to the gym. If you're overweight, you're not going to see results for 2 3 months minimum,
yeah. You
right? So
got to
it's
be
like,
in there for it. Yeah,
so every stage of our progression in life is almost like being a beginner again. It's like
yeah,
you do level one, then you're a beginner at level two, you're a beginner at level three, and
yeah,
you have to work and earn your way up. And yeah, every level is going to take that new commitment and new patience, faith. And
yeah.
patience was never easy for me, right? Because
Uh,
I think it's common for guys is we just want to, like, hey, what can we solve? What can we get done now?
yeah,
Let's just do it. Let's just do it now.
yeah,
And it was one of my biggest relationship or not issues is trying to weave that softer energy into how I care for people and love people,
yeah,
because men's way of doing something or loving people is like action, take action, get it done, solve the
yeah,
problem. That's not necessarily women's way of doing it. We have different ways, right? Yeah.
yeah.
So it's, I always say men try to get women to think like men, and women try to get men to think like women.
Yeah, and that's where it gets really dicey because you can, when that polarity gets screwed up, then it screws everything else up, and then you end up with a 60% divorce rate, or is it higher? I feel like I'm lowballing the 60% divorce
It
rate.
might be higher. Let's Google it.
Um, but that's the thing too is you hear counselors and whatnot talk about like you can't become roommates, etc. And then that to me is well, that's where the polarity gets screwed up. And if the polarity is screwed up, then it changes the dynamic in the home and in the relationship, and then the needs of each individual person are being neglected because the polarity is confusing both parties. Then the activity of the two, if they're veering in and out of both masculine and feminine roles,
Your mic. There you go. I was
both
talking to s-
and feminine roles, you are you're screwing with the polarity.
but think of a battery, right? You have positive, negative energy, and there's that attraction there. And what attracts somebody to a relationship to begin with is progression is the attractive aspect of that, right? And we're created so we're always growing and progressing, right? So you're I'm assuming attracted to your wife because you saw beauty, you saw growth, you saw progression there. Same reason why she was attracted to you, right? And what happens if you don't actually understand the responsibility of progression, somebody eventually stagnates or stops or just gets comfortable, and that kills the attraction, right? And then without that attraction continuously there and taken care of every single day, like you're saying, you read the Bible, you work out, you do yoga every single day. Without that consistency, yeah, then eventually that has to be a constance.
Yeah.
But I think it all starts with it really starts with like who we are in our as spiritual beings, what we're here to do, why we're here to grow and progress and support that other person's growth and progression. And that, I think as long as you have continuous progression, you're going to have continuous attraction.
Yeah, I think the progression is that's where like you got to understand too that it's a balancing act, right? Because your husband and wife say need to become this team, but at the same time you have to maintain for the health of your union and your relationship, you have to maintain a sense of self. You can't become you're supposed to become one, right? One flesh. But at the same time, you can't necessarily become one identical flesh. You're becoming a new, like you had said before, you got to move out or level one to move into number two. So, number two, if it makes you a team, you can't continue to operate on a level one and be part of a team. Like you're
Yeah, well,
not,
somebody's going to drag the other person down, right?
yeah,
I think that's one of I always tell people, if you're single and you're looking for a relationship, have a checklist of like core things you really want. Those are like non-negotiables. And I think one of the most important things is spiritual alignment, because if you're saying, hey, my potential is to go to like say level 100, and they're saying I want to only go to 50, well,
Right.
eventually you guys are going to get to 50. You're going to keep going. They're going to stay there,
Yeah.
right? So it's like progression is it's continual, right? It's more than just the stuff. It's more than just like the entertainment. I see a lot of people get in relationships and they do a bunch of traveling and they buy all the stuff, and then that's not really that's still level one stuff. It's like who are we as spiritual beings and how can we support that growth to get closer together, closer to God, and with that connection, how can we serve the world with that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
like
I agree.
progressing. As we ascend, it's like what are we getting closer to? We're getting closer to ourselves. We're getting closer with our relationships. We're getting closer to God. The closer we are with God, the more clarity, the more purpose, the more alignment we have, the more power and fulfillment, right?
Right. Well, and the less confusing it's supposed to be.
Well, that's the tricky question: is what is God, right? You can say I'm God in our own essence, right? We're creating the image of God, so everybody individually is godlike. But then what is your understanding of God? What is God supposed to do? What are you supposed to create, right? That's where I think everybody's individual key comes into place. I think that's figured out later on, but
Mm.
that's that piece that a relationship should help you clarify so you can actually take that and serve the world, right? Or it's because like what's the relationship do? You create children, but your other creation are, similar to that as well. You know?
Yeah. I think for me, part of that was definitely not really having an understanding of my covenant with God as far as becoming a husband and what that looked like or what that meant. And I've been figuring it out as I am a husband and a father. And yeah, it's not easy, but it's not supposed to be.
That's
You
the only
know?
way to do it, right? So how do you learn about wrestling? You get your shit
Yeah,
kicked out of you, you
yeah,
know?
it's 100%.
That's why, can you see this quote back here? Is that possible?
No,
Anyway, do you know the Man in the Arena quote by Theodore Roosevelt?
yeah.
Yeah, right. So it's like the credits due to the guy that's actually doing it, getting his ass kicked. It's not the guy pointing fingers on the sideline saying like, "Oh yeah, I would have the critic, right? I want to do this,
Yeah,
I want to do that." It's like,
right,
the respect goes to the people who are actually doing the thing, good or bad. It's like the guy
right.
that's what's it, marred, sweat, whatever. It's like
Yeah,
that's the only way. And people that don't have that faith or don't have the faith in God, they'll never take that first step and just jump 2 feet in.
yeah,
So yeah, it's just life, right? But I think just like martial arts, it's like you get I love looking at martial arts and looking at this life because it's identical, right? It's like you learn by getting your ass kicked. You learn by if you're going in a martial arts studio, you have an instructor, a mentor to help you safely get your ass kicked, right?
yeah, yeah,
It's the same thing with life too. We need people that can help us safely fail and get our ass kicked. So we're able to learn firsthand and
yeah.
say, "Oh, now I know." You know.
Yeah, I mean, it truly is that you don't learn by not doing.
Yeah.
Rarely are you able to accept the fact. Somebody could tell you the stove is hot, however many times they tell you, but like it's not that you don't believe it, but it's that you kind of just got to know,
But
before you touch it.
knowing is we have a thing in the spiritual teachings. It's you have knowledge, understanding. It's like a triangle: knowledge, understanding, and then wisdom. So knowledge is applied, or no, understanding is applied knowledge. Like so, I read this book, right? And I have knowledge. And I say, okay, cool. I'm going to test this thing out. And then I do it and I get feedback and I'm like, oh, okay, that's what it is. I have firsthand experience with it. And then wisdom is gained through sharing with others, right? So they can ascend as well. And then you have that wisdom and you empty your cup a little bit. You say, hey, I know there's a next level, there's more to do. So you
Right,
humble yourself, you empty it out, and you start that process over again.
right.
You know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like just like having kids, right? You have 2 daughters, right?
I have three. My stepdaughter is here with my wife and I. My two daughters, they live in New York, but one is going to college in Malibu, California, and the other one is going to college in London, England.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's cool. Yeah, but how's that? It's the same. Imagine that's got to be. I look at being a parent the same way as God must look at us, right? He's like, hey, do this. And you're like, like you don't want to hear it, whatever.
Well, I mean, that's what it's biblical, right? I mean, that's what the Bible says, that he wants that relationship with us. It's kind of like, the way that when we were all teenagers and like our parents would drop us off at the basketball game or whatever, it was like you didn't want the other kids to see you getting out of your dad's car, but how else was it that they would think you got there? But at the same time, it's like that's God wants that relationship with us. He wants to be our father. That's how he sees us. That's how he looks at us, and he wants good for us. But he also understands, and that's the discerning eye of a parent, at least a good parent, is to know that like I can't do it for them or else I'm robbing them of the opportunity to learn, to
Yeah.
be better, to acquire those skills to go later into life.
What about something just popped up when we were talking about this about, I always look at, the whole spiritual path is learn principles of God. It's like the microcosm, the micro, the macrocosm, right? So it's learn these big universal principles and apply them to our life, right? To become godlike. And I think this relates back to you doing like the yoga and serving people now, but the joy of being a father, the joy of teaching your kids something, the joy of teaching clients something to see them grow and progress, right? I feel this is from my experience. I've had a very full life early on. And now when somebody says, well, what do you do for fun? I'm like, I help people. Like that's the most
Yeah.
joy and fulfillment I get is it's not really about me doing the thing anymore. It's about me sharing that with others. It gives me more joy and fulfillment now. Right. And I could assume that's what God is like, hey, I'm offering you all this love and abundance so you can go grow and learn. And then God receives that same fulfillment through us learning and progressing as well. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's pleasing to him,
Hmm.
and again, I'll say it's biblical, it's right there in black and white, so to speak.
Yeah. So it's like, maybe that's the lesson. The easiest way to progress is get out of your own way and open up to God and fix that relationship.
I think so, because I think I lived a good period of my life, a very long period of my life with that relationship in a state of ill repair. I don't think there was ever a time in my life where I didn't believe in God, but I definitely was in a phase of my life. I was raised Catholic, but I wasn't practicing at all. And I had not found Christianity. Let's just say I hadn't found a Christian church yet and had a Christian experience. It was all Catholicism. And I know that the Catholic Church is somehow Christian as well. I get all that before anybody corrects me. But the Catholic Church experience for me was one that I didn't want any more of it, where the Christian church experience for me has been one where I've actively sought out more of it.
I
I've
think that's
even
common.
spent money to seek more of it. And I feel like, today, as a 48-year-old husband and father and whatever else it is that I am, I seek it every day. I do read my Bible every day, and I do pray, at least for the last, we'll say since November. My prayer life has become much stronger, and my prayers are different. And I do believe that like prayer is the power of prayer is it's real.
Yeah, I think that could be looked at as like a level one thing though, right? The religion, because I see a lot of people now. I was raised Catholic and it didn't fully click for me, right? Because I was like, there has to be something. I understand God and Jesus and all this stuff. But there has to be something bigger. There has to be a bigger whole to all this,
Yeah.
right? And I think, each level, like we were saying, like each level, well, we weren't saying this, but each level you get closer and closer in your relationship closer to God, right? So think if all these religions, say there's 10 religions at level one, level two is going to be a more unified state of that. Level three, they're all going to go up and eventually unify.
Yeah.
So it was very confusing to me. Like, okay, but you're Jewish, you're Muslim, you're Catholic, you're Christian, you're Buddhist, Hindu, whatever it is. We're all talking about the same thing. So why can't we just go up here and just commune and connect, you know?
Right.
And that's a daily thing. It's not a go to church on Sunday thing. It's a 24/7 thing. You know,
Yeah.
how can we bring sacredness into every single thing we do in life, every relationship, every conversation we have, and how can we unify with that person that's standing right in front of us, you know?
Yeah.
So to me, that was a deeper sense of I don't know, you call it spirituality, religion, whatever you call it. That filled in the gap for me because there was no, once I realized that there wasn't separation, there wasn't, you know, conflict, because it was like, well, who am I fighting with? I'm fighting with me. I'm trying to unite with that person, you know?
Right. Yeah, and so then that I would imagine is kind of our own natural human instincts to not fight it as much as at the very least resist it because we're skeptical, right? And we're I mean, I know pro wrestlers are traditionally some of the most skeptical people you could ever be around, but I just think in general, like the skepticism, especially when it comes to religion and it comes to like that question, what is that question, like, well, what's next, and what it in relation to that, like, well, then if you find out what's next, well, then what is this, and then
What do
you
you mean?
bring it to all, well, I'm saying like this life, you know.
Yeah.
And I guess the most sense I've been able to make of it now is the acceptance that we're never going to know, but that doesn't give us an excuse to not pursue it.
Well, I don't think you're ever going to know everything. I think, like I was saying before, you're gonna know the next piece at the right time as you're moving. You're gonna know as much as you need to know for that moment,
Right. And I
right?
think that that kind of goes back to that levels thing. But then we're also, if that is the case, because we're only able to really conceptualize in this earthly world, right?
But
Like
think
that,
of here, like think of physicality, right? Physicality, there's space between, we're how many miles away? Maybe 250 miles away,
right.
right? There's space between us, but energetically there's no space. So it's like as we progress and become less and less physical, we move on to higher and higher dimensions. Everything again goes back into itself, right? So I think that's why everybody that is stuck in life, to me, I'm like, hey, look, find that person that can help you, find that relationship, fix whatever you need to fix to heal that relationship, because that's ultimately where things are moving. So I think you can look at it at least that way of like, hey, we're coming from this very separate state, this very physical state where there's all this space and there's this disagreement and there's this struggle and stuff like that. And our task is to figure out how to unify, right? And I think that's always going to be our task, is how to become more and more united. And then every step of the way, that's going to be more joy, love, and fulfillment. And that's an infinite thing of how, that same with, you look at marriage, we're talking about marriage, right? Every step of the marriage is how can we unify more and more and more. It's like when you get married, marriage isn't the last step in unification. It's like the first step, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that's, you're at that base level of level two, and then you still have to go up those levels and continue to unify, right? If you see a very old couple, say if you see a couple in their 90s, it's like, what are they doing? It's just a lot of love and joy. It's that essence that they have. It might not be, they might not have been physical anymore for the last 20 some years, but they still have that energetic piece to it.
Right.
So
Yeah. I mean, I guess it'd be a question for one of those couples, but I think too, being in a, younger marriage, just wondering like, okay, how much energy was wasted or how much was put into like how, you expect and you want everything to be perfect along the way, and then when things are not, you have to, that's the give and take of like being able to realize like, okay, it's not, it's going to be ugly in places and it's going to get banged up, we're not, it's the same thing with like your body, right? You're not going to roll into the next life with
you got to heal.
this pristine vehicle that you just bumped around this world in for your whole life. Like you're going to show up with a torn rotator cuff, and you're going to show up with a bum knee or whatever it is. I say torn rotator cuff because I know I have one. So I live with it every day. And yeah, I guess it's just kind of what it is, but it's interesting to think about.
But think about progression, right? If you're or not progression, perfection, right? If something's 100% perfect, well, then what? So
Yeah.
then it's not. It's just stuck, right? So why would we want? I think the joy is in the perfecting, but not the perfection,
Well,
right? So
that's yeah, and that's
there's
it. That's understanding that, but accepting the fact that there will be no perfect, but still you're going to strive for it.
yeah,
It's kind of
right.
like trying to figure out what's next, but knowing you're never going to answer it.
Well, that's cool. That's the exciting part of life. That's like the thrill. That's like, wow, this is
Yeah.
that makes it fun. If you knew the whole thing right now, you'd be like, well, it's like knowing back years ago, they used to have like manuals for PlayStation with all the cheat codes, right?
Yeah.
So I would bang out a game within a week. I'd beat the whole
Right.
game
Right.
because I had cheat codes. And
Right.
it's like,
Right.
well, how fun actually, like thinking about that, it's funny. It's like,
Yeah.
how fun is that, right? It probably would have been more fun to like fail and try and try and try.
Agreed.
And then the joy
Agreed.
after, the joy when I actually get to the next level is like, oh, cool, I figured it out. I feel it. But
Right.
I don't know why. So this is funny, but
I mean, it makes sense, though. It makes total sense.
yeah, certain cheat codes can help you progress faster, but having all the cheat codes at once is like it's kind of a waste.
Yeah, I would think so too. It'd be like sitting down to watch a movie and like just knowing, like having somebody come tell you the finish right as you start it. It'd be like, okay, I mean, I can watch it, but
That's what
now
I
you've
do.
robbed me of the joy of watching it.
That's what I do sometimes. I'll watch the last like 5 or 10 minutes to figure it out because I like when you watch a movie twice, and the second time you're like, okay, I already know what's happening, so you can seek out those little pieces, and it clarifies more.
Definitely never done that.
It's a weird, yeah, it's one of my weird quirks. It's
That
definitely it's
is
fucked
weird.
up.
That's weird.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll watch the ending. People when I watch movies with people, they hate that or they just won't watch movies with me because
I bet. I bet. I can't imagine there'd be a lot of people that are like, yeah, I do that too.
probably none. But but yeah, it's just because I want to see kind of those pieces. Maybe it's like watching a movie twice faster. I don't know
I kind of get what you're saying. Like I can relate to
because I want to see how that plays into the end,
right. I can kind
right?
of relate to, but I still just can't see myself making sense out of that as an actual practice.
Yeah, maybe I'll stop doing this. Cut the bad habit out. But
Maybe.
yeah, I think it's cool to see like what I love about this podcast is when you hear people's stories and hear about different trials and struggles and progression in relationships and how they're evolving and serving other people. It's like it really is. There's a path, right?
Yeah.
It's always the personal gain and kind of struggle and that point of uh, hitting that challenge and trying to figure out the solution, right? And a lot of people, once they figure out the solution, they're just inspired to, like you said before, you're like, oh, I never want to do this thing, but once
Yeah.
I did it, inspired me to share it with other people. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the coolest parts about life. It's funny because, like I was saying before, I never wanted to be a guide or a healer, but as I did it and as I got the results and felt the shifts and the joy and the better relationships and everything, I was like, oh, I want to share this with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think for me, part of it with DDP yoga specifically was that there was a lot of stuff in the beginning when I started doing it that like I fought it and was like, well, that's just the way and we're talking strictly physical for the most part, but like, well, that's just the way my toes are. That's just the way this is. And it's like, if I was smarter about it at that time, I would have realized, like, no, that's the way my toes have gotten. And that's the way that like, my body wasn't always this. And if you, that, I had such an epiphany when it came to that for me to be able to help other people understand, especially in the early part of the process where those things aren't evident,
Mm,
to help them navigate that with an understanding that, like, hey, you signed up for this process, right? And we can't fast forward to just the good stuff.
the end of the movie.
We can't
Yeah.
just watch the end of the movie.
Right. Well,
Exactly.
that's funny because it's like that's like anything. It's like we were talking about this pre-call, right? Is when you shine more light on something, you start a process, right? And you're like, okay, this is where I'm at, and then you're like, well, I think what I'm seeing with you're talking about DDP is people assume, oh, I'm in this state of suffering, I can't fix this. And you're saying like, no, I have a solution for you. And what they didn't think was possible to correct, now through that process, they're starting to correct it. But also, as you're going through that process, your more things are being exposed that need corrected as well too, to
100%.
eventually, right? And that's where people are like, oh, they can be kind of like, oh man, like there's more stuff to do, like shit. But it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's just showing you what you can actually do so you can get to that end
Right.
process. And
Right.
you have to see the process entirely through to actually get to that final result, right?
Yeah, and then I think they're actually, as much as we talk about the end and the final result and whatnot, like once you get close to it, you realize like it doesn't exist either. Like there is no end there.
Then there's a whole
There's
nother.
only, yeah, there's only more continue, and then that's it. And that, I guess that's kind of the beauty of it, right? Is like it's never ending. I mean, as long
What's the
as you're
thing?
taking breath, it's still there.
Yeah, like even wrestling though, there's no. I mean, there might be an end to you actually being in a ring, but there is no. If you still want to serve wrestling in some way or serve people, or how that evolves, right? It evolves into
Yeah,
the next level of doing something, right? So it's going from being the wrestler, getting banged up, learning the lessons, now training the wrestlers,
yeah,
now supporting something bigger that maybe supports the wrestlers and the people who are training the wrestlers,
yeah,
right? And I think that's where wisdom comes in hand,
yeah,
is the guy who's really has, say, 30 plus years of experience, has the most wisdom to share with,
right.
that guy's going to have a greater capacity to create impact because of all that experience and the struggle and the challenge and overcoming all that stuff too,
Yeah,
which then causes the people behind him to progress even faster.
exactly.
So
And I'll be honest, that's why I stopped coloring my beard, was so that people will trust my wisdom.
yeah, that's why I grew a man bun, because when I was saying, hey, I was a spiritual guide and I had my
Right.
hair down, they're like, you have muscles, tattoos. I don't know about that. As soon as I tied my hair back, it
There
just,
you go.
yeah, they're
Yep.
like, oh yeah, I trust him now. He's spiritual. I'm like,
Gotta look the part. Gotta look the part.
yeah, it's true. You got to get the handlebar mustache or something now.
Hmm.
You had one of those before, no?
I did, yeah. I still have it there now. It's just a little less pronounced with it being white, but I still, when I go to work, when I wrestle, I wax it up and
Yeah.
make it twirl it.
Yeah. Somebody told me the other day, oh, you should have a handlebar mic now. Never going to work for me. Can barely grow a beard.
I never thought I would either, and then it happened, and it's
For what, a
been
beard
for
or
like a decade now. It's just the
oh, yeah.
twirled mustache. I never thought I'd have a mustache really, and then I started to do the beard, and then yeah, who knows how it happened? I don't really remember, but
So never say never. I'll have a handlebar mustache by next
never.
year.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, we never
Could
know.
be,
But
could be.
I think that's a cool. It's been a cool episode because I think what it really covered, just the struggle and consistent effort needed to make something really good and push through those challenges and create deeper relationships, right? And always focus on progression. And then, like I was saying, I have a lot of like older clients I work with, but what does that like? What do those next stages look like, right? As we, a lot of those guys have worked in there's certain industries for 30, 40, 50 years. And now they're
Yeah,
thinking like, well, what's next? And it's like that next level is share your wisdom with others. And then there's a next level to that, next level to that, right? So there's never a point, unless you think that's, unfortunately some people think like this life is all there is and there's nothing past that. And they think, well,
yeah,
I'm just gonna cruise for the next 20, 30 years till I pass. But that's
yeah.
unfortunate. That's unfortunate because I think even if you're, for me, when I'm 80 years old, I feel like I hope I'm still doing something, like giving back to people, helping in some way.
I plan to. I plan on
Yeah.
that being the life I live. It would make less sense not to.
Yeah, because like, what are you gonna do, right? It's like that's the joy. That's the joy of being here. But I think
Uh,
I was gonna ask you before when we were talking about rejoicing.
yeah,
I've had a lot of conversation with people about gratitude, right? It's like
yeah,
gratitude of one, just like being here, because if we weren't here, what else would we be doing? Floating around some dark space, just kind of not having these experiences, right? I
yeah,
mean, we can judge this experience good or bad depending on our perspective, but I think a good foundation for people is even if they're going through tough times, like you said, like those tough times are going to be the catalyst for growth. Be like you're saying, rejoice for those tough times. Be grateful for those tough times because, like, hey, it's just if we were, I was thinking about this actually this morning when I was waking up. Imagine life how it is with all the struggles, and imagine absolute darkness and nothing, no experience, no joy, no love, no ups, no downs, no nothing. It's
Right.
like, and then throw somebody in here, right? We have cool, like cars, we at the beach, we got people, we got relationships, we got wrestling, we have all this fun stuff to do. They'd be
Yeah.
like, holy shit, that's amazing. Even if they have almost nothing, they'd be like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Right.
Right. Like, well, yeah, think about it that way. And like, once that lands, you're like, wow, like every little thing, it's so cool that that thing is here.
Yeah.
Right. And it just came from basically nothing.
Right.
Right. So
Well, I think it's human nature to focus on the problem. I
that's
think
sort
that
of how we're tuned.
say it on social media too. Like you focus on one bad comment, not the 12 good ones or whatever it is. But I think that it's all just a commentary on what it is to be human. And God created us to be this imperfect being that we are, and that's why He sent His only Son to pay for our sin, flesh. And
That was a bad trade then.
was
I get that's a bad trade off if he had to die for our sins. I get that with he created a path, but I've gotten that conversation with some people, and I'm like, I wouldn't die for the sins of irresponsible people. I would die to give them potential to keep growing and progressing, right? Because a lot of people, this is common in like religion, is like, oh, Jesus died for our sins, like we have forgiveness. Yes, that's true. We can be forgiven, but it's not a what's the word? It doesn't say, oh, we can just be irresponsible and we're going to die. And I've heard people say, oh, I've accepted Jesus, I can mess up everything and still be accepted. It's
well.
like, yeah,
I mean, that's really kind of prostituting the
yeah,
word,
well, that's it.
for your own purposes.
Yeah,
And
people do that.
well, there you go. I mean, then you have to see it as like, well, that person is not necessarily the person that's walking with the Spirit, because they're omitting that portion of it, which is your obedience to the Word, your obedience to the Holy Spirit, really, because that's what's supposed to fill you with
Yeah,
His Word and supposed to clue you into, and so then that's the path that you should be following, and only you know if you're following that path or you're not. Like, truly,
yeah,
only
yeah,
you know that. But that's between you and God also. Like, you
yeah.
can you can lie to everybody in this fleshly world, but like,
Can't lie to yourself.
you can't, right, you can't, not only you can't lie to yourself, but like,
Yeah,
he knows if you lied, and it's a sin to lie. So like, it's been a huge awakening for me in that way. I had a lack of awareness for lying, and I truly thought like, well, no, I don't lie. Like, I'm trustworthy, and I believe that I always have been, but not in the way that I thought I was, because in the life, the way that I grew up, there were things that I saw that I didn't realize at the time, but they affected me in a way that made me like minimalize certain untruths and call them like, well, but it's a little white lie, and there's no such thing, And I've realized that now, like, that a lie is a lie is a lie, and you're not. It's biblical, man. You're not supposed to lie.
well, lying is giving away your power too. So there can be lies as like I lie to you about something that, oh, I didn't do that thing, right? That's one
Yeah.
form of lie. But I think lying to yourself is the worst. That's a maybe in a relationship somebody says, hey, did you do this thing? I lied. That's a lack of power. But then there's lying to yourself of your potential. That's also a lack of power.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to keep you stuck because you keep saying, oh, I can't do it, I can't do it. That's a lie in itself. So it's like every time we lie, we give away more power, more power, more power. It's not until we find the clarity and truth and come back to our center that we obtain that power to actually solve the issue. Otherwise, it's just cloud and an illusion and shit, and it never gets solved.
That's an interesting way to see it. Every time we lie, we give away more of our power. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a weakness, right? It's like the person
Yeah,
who's like strong knows themselves, and sure, there's like, hey, the truth is not the easiest, but it's the most powerful way.
right. Well,
And I think,
that's knowing yourself as well, to be able to stand in your truth and realize too, not that it's an age thing. It's more of the fact that, like, okay, I'm a 48-year-old man. I'm somebody's father. I'm somebody's husband. I should not have to lie about anything, whether that be to my wife, my boss, my, you know, whatever. They're just the police officer that pulls you over. Like, there's just but we find all these fleshly reasons to be dishonest, and
yeah,
yeah, it's tough. We battle with it every day. And then that's where I think he did die for our sins, because those sins, I'm not going to murder anyone. I'm pretty confident of that every day. When I wake up and I say, I'm not going to lie to anyone today, that's a hard one to not falter on sometimes, And
yeah, it could
I
be out
think
of
that
convenience. It's could be it's
exactly.
justified out of convenience to say, hey, I don't want to deal with this thing right
And
now. I
if
don't feel,
yes, and
but
if
that's
you can
also like it's
justify it, if
yeah,
you can justify it, then you're doing it. You're giving yourself the out. You're not holding yourself to the standard that you would expect others to be held to. So I think that that's where the grace of God comes in, and why Jesus did die for our sins. Because if it's the same sin to tell a lie about, did you just run that red light, murdering someone in cold blood, if it's the same in God's eyes, yeah, we might have needed Jesus to die for our sin.
yeah, there's a path. So I say everyone's on the same path. We're just at different levels, right? So somebody who's progressing and not lying or doing what they need to do, they're going to be further along, right? The only difference is with that path that Jesus set for us is the person who's lying is slowing down their own progression. They still have the same potential to progress and be where all the other people are, but like it comes back to what we were saying with not respecting that, right? It's like it goes back to personal responsibility. Hey, if you're here and the path is up here, it's your responsibility to put yourself up there. So every time you lie and set yourself back, you're just nobody else is doing it to you. You're doing it to yourself.
Right.
So if you want to grow and progress, and that is the clarifying the truth, the power, the responsibility. Those are the pieces that are needed to move us forward, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
in a simple situation, it's like when we have clarity and truth and power, we don't have to hide behind veils and lies and all that stuff. It's like if there's a hard conversation with a partner, and we have, if we're bringing truth and we have the power to actually, we don't have fear, then we just handle it and it gets done and it is what it is, right? And then we move
Yeah.
forward, right? So it's yeah, this stuff is easy to talk to. It's the application. I understand it's tricky though.
Yeah.
That's
100%.
the fun of life, is just trying to figure it out, find the needle in the haystack, and the good and the bad, and
Yeah.
how to live a good life and figure out this craziness. But yeah,
Yeah.
is do you have any like classes coming up or anything you want to leave some people if they can want to connect with you?
So if you are in the Florida area, I work at a wrestling school called the House of Champions. It's in Longwood, Florida. We teach wrestling, but we do birthday parties, and they've done gender reveal matches. There's a program called it's the Real Wrestling Experience, and it's a whole thing. It's on the website. It's worth checking out. It's very unique, very cool. You could do like office get together through RWE, or like a kid's birthday party or something along those lines. But thehouseofchampions.com, and you can find me on Instagram, the Bobby Fish. I'm on there. And NSB Studios is another gym where I teach DDP yoga.
You got the both sides now. You got your you want to come get beat up and wrestle. You want to relax and
Yes,
severity and mercy there.
exactly. Exactly.
It's
It's,
just
it's the yin to the yang.
yeah, you gotta just decide what side of Bobby you want. Either go to Longboard or New Smyrna.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can
You can
see
get
whatever side of them you want.
right. You want me angry, or you want me peaceful and serene.
Yeah, exactly. Oh,
Yeah.
cool. All right, man. I appreciate you coming on.
No,
Thanks so
man, I
much.
appreciate you having me. It was great seeing you. Great having a conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, man.